Hello, welcome back to Math 121. This is a video over section 2.3, and we're going to be talking about linear functions and slopes. So the first thing I want to talk about is the concept of a linear function. So a linear function represents a line, okay? And the first thing that we know about a linear function is that it contains a slope. Okay, so the slope is another word for steepness. Okay, it's a measure of steepness. It's also called the rate of change. Okay, and it's also called rise over run. All right, so we've seen this before. Rise over run. All right, so we've seen this before. There's a formula to calculate slope given 2 points. So given 2 points, okay, and I'd call this x sub 1, comma, y sub 1, and x sub 2, comma, y sub 2. Okay, we can do this. We can calculate the slope m by doing y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Okay, now when I call this x sub 1 y sub 1, this is my first point, okay, that I have. This is my second point that I have. Okay, and so when we take those numbers and we plug that into the formula, then that's what's going to give us our slope. Okay, so we've seen this before. Just wanted to make sure we got this written down. Okay, the next thing that we want to do is we want to be able to calculate the slope, but we also want to be able to write equations in point slope form and slope intercept form of a graph. Okay, so here's what I got. So let's talk about point slope form. Okay, point slope form. Okay, and what I've got is this. That's going to be y minus y sub 1 is equal to our slope m times x minus x sub 1. Okay, and what this is that m is our slope, and we have a point on the graph, okay, x sub 1, comma, y sub 1. Okay, so that's point slope form. The other thing that we have is slope intercept form. Let's write that just below. Okay, so make sure you guys are writing small. Slope intercept form. Okay, and what that is, and this is where you're going to mainly see a lot of your linear functions, but it's going to be y is equal to mx plus b, okay, where m is your slope and b is your y-intercept. Okay, and so there's a direct relationship between point slope form and slope intercept form. Now, when you're writing equations, we can actually use both of these. We always want to end up in slope intercept form, but the point slope form can get us to slope intercept form. Okay. All right. So now the other one that we have is what we call the general form. Okay, and this is when x and y are on both sides of the equation. So I'm going to call this ax plus by is equal to c. Okay, and the difference between slope intercept form and the other ones is that x and y are on the same side of the equal sign. Okay, so we're going to be able to use all three of these to graph and to write equations. Okay. Now the thing I want to talk about before we get started on some practice problems is graphing using the intercepts. Okay. Now let's just talk about graphing linear equations. Okay. So in slope intercept form, this is the easiest method. So slope intercept intercept form, okay, using y equals mx plus b, what we do is we say that b is our starting point, okay, and we use the slope to generate more points. So we use the slope to generate points on the graph. Okay. Now we can also graph using intercepts. So graph using intercepts. Okay. And when I graph using intercepts, here's what I want to think about. Let's just look at a graph real quick. Okay. Here's my x-axis. Here's my y-axis. Now, any point along here, okay, and let's just call this like 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, and 4, 0, okay, the y value, so the y value is always 0, okay, for an x-intercept. Okay, now if I had my y-intercepts, okay, and let's call this like 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, and maybe 0, 4, okay, all of these values, okay, all of these points, the x value is 0. Okay, so anytime that you cross the x-axis, your y value is going to be 0. Okay, anytime you cross the y-axis, your x value is going to be 0. So what we do is if we want to find the x-intercept, okay, we let y equal 0 and solve for x. Okay, and we'll have practice doing all this, so if you don't understand it right now, you will. Okay, for the y-intercept, okay, it's the opposite. You want to let x equal 0 and solve for y. Okay, and that's what you've got. All right, so that's what we're doing in a nutshell. Okay, but let's go ahead and let's talk about, you know, some of these problems here. Ooh, last thing I want to do. No, never mind. Do that in the next section. Okay, so let's find the slope of the line passing through these points. So if I'm finding the slope here, I want to do x, label this x sub 1, y sub 1, label this x sub 2, y sub 2. Okay, and I want to show you a couple of different ways of doing this. But let's calculate the slope using our formula. All right, so it's y sub 2 minus y sub 1. So negative 2 minus 4 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1, which is negative 4 minus negative 3. Okay, so even if you have negatives, you just want to put those in. We're subtracting those negatives. Okay, and so we're going to get this. We're going to get that m is equal to negative 2 minus 4 is negative 6. The bottom part is going to be negative 4 plus 3. All right, so then m is going to equal negative 6 over negative 1. All right, and so our slope for this problem is going to be that m is equal to positive 6, okay? And that's just our measurement of our steepness, okay? Now, another way that we could do it is we could switch these problems, these points, okay? I just want to show you this real quick, but let's switch them around. So I got negative 4 comma negative 2, and I've got negative 3 comma 4. All right, I'm going to call this x sub 1, call this y sub 1, call this x sub 2, y sub 2. All right, so if I put it into my slope formula, I'm going to get 4 minus negative 2, okay, over negative 3 minus negative 4. All right, and so here's what we're going to get. We're going to get negative, or 4 minus negative 2, which is really going to be 4 plus 2, over negative 3 plus 4. And so 4 plus 2 is going to give us a value of 6. Negative 3 plus 4 is going to give us a value of 1. So we end up getting the same thing. We end up getting the slope of 6, okay? And the difference is that, you know, it doesn't matter which point you start with, okay? But on this one, I had to do, you know, if you start with this y value here, okay, you have to start with this x value down here. So whichever one you go for is the one you do. I usually go, you know, just label the first one x1, y1, this one x2, y2, and work from right to left, okay, to get my point. So it doesn't matter which one you do as long as you get it right. So that's the only thing. All right, let's take a look at the second one, okay. We'll label this x1, y1, x2, y2. All right, and so let's find our slope. M is going to equal 5 minus negative 2 over negative 1 minus 4. All right, so if I've got 5 minus negative 2, that's really going to give me 5 plus 2 over negative 1 minus 4. All right, and so 5 plus 2 is going to give us a value of 7 in our numerator. In our denominator, we get negative 5. Okay, so our slope value here is negative 7/5. Okay, and that's what we're doing on that. Okay, so you just use your formula, plug it in, and we got to be able to find the slope. Okay, now on this one, it says write an equation in point slope form for a line with a slope of 6 that passes through the point 2, negative 5, and then solve the equation for y. So here's what I know. Okay, I want to use point slope form. Okay, I want to start with that. Okay, and that, let's just write that down. We've got y minus y sub 1 is equal to m times x minus x sub 1. Okay, now the information that I know is that they gave us a slope, m is equal to 6. And then they gave us a point on the graph called 2, negative 5. All right, so I've got our slope, and then I've got our point. So this is our slope. I need our point, okay, which is going to be 2 comma negative 5. Let's just verify that that's what it is, 2 negative 5. Okay, so we got the point 2 negative 5, all right? And so with our slope of 6, point 2 negative 5, this is my x, whoops, this is my x sub 1, and this is my y sub 1, okay? And so hence the name point slope form, okay, where m is my slope, x sub 1, y sub 1 is my point. So what I want to do is I want to take these numbers and plug them into this equation here. All right, so I'm going to do y minus y sub 1. So I'm going to do y minus negative 5 is equal to my slope, which is 6, times x minus x sub 1, which was 2. Okay, and so this is me just taking these numbers and plugging them in. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is simplify this. Okay, and so here's my answer in point slope form. Okay, that's that. Now let's solve this equation for y. Okay, so now let's put this into slope intercept form. Okay, and so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to copy this down. I've got y minus negative 5 is equal to 6 times x minus 2. All right, so I'm going to change this up, and so when I subtract a negative, I'm going to get y plus 5 is equal to 6 times x minus 2. I'm going to distribute my 6 here. So we're going to get 6x minus 12, and then this is y plus 5. I'm going to subtract a 5 from both sides. And so I get that y is equal to 6x minus 17. Okay, and this equation is in slope intercept. So, you know, the thing that you have to understand is that both of these equations are the same. Okay, they're just written differently. All right, I had to plug my numbers into my slope intercept form in order to get my point slope form. All right, and so that's what we've got. Okay. Now on this one, it wants me to write an equation in point slope form for the line passing through these points and then solve the equation for y. Okay, I'm going to do this using two different methods just to show you guys. So write my equation in point slope form given those two. So I'm going to do this. I've got x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. Okay, I'm going to do this in two different ways to show you that you can use point slope form, but there is another way to obtain your linear equation from by using slope intercept form. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to come in here. Let's first find our slope. We have to do that because we're only given 2 points. Okay, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to do negative 6 minus negative 1. So negative 6 minus negative 1 over negative 1 minus negative 2. So then that's going to give me negative 6 plus 1 divided by negative 1 plus 2. All right. And then this is going to give me negative 5. Okay, negative 6 plus 1 is negative 5. Negative 1 plus 2 is going to give me over 1. So my slope value is going to be negative 5. okay? And that's my slope. Now, what I want to do is use my points. Now, it doesn't matter which point we use. We'll just go ahead and use this first point. You could use either point you wanted, okay? You can choose whichever one you want. I'm just going to choose this as the point we're going to use, okay? So I've got this, I've got my slope, and I've got my point, -2, -1. Okay, now I'm going to do this in point slope form, all right? So I'm going to call this x1, y1. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug those in. So I'm going to do y minus y sub 1, which is -1, is equal to m times x minus x sub 1, which is -2. Okay, and so let's simplify this. I get y plus 1. I don't want to put, not m in there. I want to put in -5 for m. Sorry. -5. Okay, so I get y plus 1 is equal to -5 times x plus 2. Okay, now what I want to do is distribute my -5, okay, just like we did in the last one, and we're going to get y plus 1 is equal to -5x minus 10. And then I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides, and I get that y is equal to -5x minus 11, okay? And that's my equation. So this is point slope, okay, and this is slope intercept, okay? Now, what I can also do is I can take this point here and the slope and do something else. So this is one way. All right, let's do this another way, where our m is equal to -5, and we have a point -2, -1. Okay, now, in this method, all right, what I'm doing is I'm using slope-intercept form. I'm using y equals mx plus b, okay? And so I already have my slope m. My x value is -2. My y value is -1. So the only difference between when I do slope this method and the other one is I don't call this x1, y1, all right, because we don't have that in over here. So now what I'm going to do is this, all right. So now I'm going to plug in the values that I've got. So I'm going to plug in for y, I'm going to plug in -1 is equal to m, okay, which is -5, and then times x, which is -2, and then plus b. So watch what I get. I'm going to get -1 is equal to +10 plus b. And all I'm doing is solving this equation for b. Now I'm going to subtract 10 from both sides, and we get that b is equal to -11. Okay? So I have my y-intercept, I have my slope, and so I write my equation like this, and I say y equals -5x minus 11. And that is my answer. Now, it's the same thing that we got over here. Okay, the only difference is that we use slope-intercept form instead of point slope form. So you can use either or. It kind of just depends on what you want to do. You do need to know both because some questions will require you on the test to just put your answer in point slope form. Okay, so that's all I got for that first page. Let's go to the next page. Okay, so on this, it wants us to graph this linear function. Now, the good news is that this is already in slope-intercept form. Okay, so this is the same thing as me writing y equals 3/5 x plus 1. Now, remember that this follows the same structure as this, y equals mx plus b. So we can identify what our slope is, okay, which is over here, which is 5. So our slope m is equal to 5, or I'm sorry, 3/5. And then our y-intercept b is this number here. So b is equal to +1. Now, this is the starting point. Okay, this is a point I know on the graph. Okay, so the y-intercept is 1. So all I do is go over to my graph and I click on +1. Okay, now when we're graphing, we've probably already seen this before, but the slopes, so we have types of slopes. We have 4 types of slopes. Okay, I want to make sure we write this down. Okay, and that's where we have a positive slope. So we have a negative slope. So where we have 0 slope, horizontal line, and then a vertical line is undefined. Okay, so because we have a positive slope, okay, here, 3/5, we're going to go in this direction. Okay, but we start at 1. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to rise up 3 and run 5. So I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and plot a point. Do the same thing, 1, 2, 3, go over 5, plot a point, okay? Same thing down over here. Now I can go down and to the left and create that same positive slope. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? And then 1, 2, 3 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so I have this line here, and what I want to do is I want to connect them and make a slope, or make a line going through all those points, okay? And that's how I would graph that equation, okay? Now let's graph a couple of these problems where we've got horizontal lines. So if I have the line y equals 3, okay, what that is that's just going to be a horizontal line through 3. And that's how we graph. Imagine that's more of a horizontal line, okay? If I graph the equation x equals negative 3, okay, let's go over here to negative 3 on the x, and we're going to graph a vertical line, okay? So pretty straightforward on those, okay? Now on this one, what I want to do is graph this using the slope and the y-intercept. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write this equation out. I've got 3x plus 6y minus 12, so 3x plus 6y minus 12 is equal to 0. Okay, and what I want to do is I want to find the slope and the y-intercept of this line. Now, in order for me to do that, I need to solve for y. Okay, so I need to move everything else over. All right, so I'm first going to move over this minus 12. Okay, so I'm going to add 12 to both sides. All right, so I get 3x plus 6y is equal to positive 12. Okay, I'm going to solve for y, so the first thing I'm going to do is subtract 3x from both sides. Now, when I subtract 3x from both sides, I can't combine any of these as like terms. I'm going to write it like 6y is equal to negative 3x plus 12. Okay, I can't combine these two numbers because this doesn't have an x. All right, then I'm going to divide everything by 6. All right, so divide that by 6, divide that by 6, divide that by 6. So those are going to divide out, and we end up with y equals negative 3 divided by 6 will simplify to negative 1/2 x, and then 12 over 6 is plus 2. So here's what I got. I have that the slope is equal to negative 1/2, and I've got that the y-intercept is equal to 2. So what I can do, all right, so I've got this equation now in slope-intercept form, and I can just graph it, okay? So let's start here at positive 2 on the y-axis, okay, plot a point. And then I'm going to use my slope of negative 1/2 to generate other points. So that means I'm going to go down 1 to the right 2, down to the right 2, 1 over 2, down 1 over 2, down 1 over 2, up 1 over 2, and go the other way, okay? And guys, these should all be things that you've seen before. So I'm kind of rifling through this, mainly because you've done this, all right? All right, and then I'm going to draw a line connecting those points, okay? And that's how we do those, all right? So that's how we graph. Let's go ahead and learn about how we graph another one. Okay, now on the last page, I want to graph this equation that's in standard form using intercepts. So one way you could do this, guys, you could always try and solve this for y. That will work, but you could also graph this using the intercepts. So here's what I got. Here's what I want to do. I'm going to first, for the x-intercept, okay, I'm going to let y equals 0 and solve for x. Okay, so 3x minus 2y minus 6. So 3x minus 2y minus 6 is equal to 0. Okay, so I'm going to let y equal 0. So I'm going to plug this in, 0 in for y. So I got 3x minus 2 times 0 minus 6 is equal to 0. So negative 2 times 0 is just going to become 0. So we get 3x minus 6 is equal to 0. So I'm going to add 6 to both sides to get my value for x. And I get 3x is equal to 6, divide by 3 on both sides. So I get that x is equal to 2, all right? And so that is my x-intercept, okay? Now what I'm going to do, over at 2 on the x, I'm going to plot that point. Now x is 2, y is equal to 0. You have that point, 2, 0 on the graph, okay? All right, so you have that number. All right, let's find our y-intercept. So I've got, for our y-intercept, we want to let x equals 0 and then solve for y. Okay, and so I'm going to do 3 times 0 minus 2y minus 6 is equal to 0. So 3 times 0 is just going to give me 0. I'm going to add 6 to both sides. So we get 2y, negative 2y is equal to positive 6. Now I'm going to divide by negative 2 on both sides. And so we get that y is equal to negative 3. Okay. Now again, this is going to translate to the point 0 comma negative 3. Okay, because x was 0, y is negative 3. So then we go over here, we plot that point down here. All right, and we get negative 3 down here. Now, all we really need to plot these points is just, or to make a line is just 2 points. All right, so I'm going to, just draw this guy here. All right, and, you can just draw a line using those 2 points. Now, it may not be as accurate, but that's the idea, okay? So it just kind of depends, like which one you like easier and which one you think is a little bit more efficient. It definitely depends on the type of equation. Like if I'm given an equation in slope-intercept form, I'm just going to use that. But if given in something in standard form, I could either solve for y or I could use the intercepts, okay? So it kind of just depends on the problem. All right, let's take a look at this guy. It says use the data points here shown but not labeled in this figure. So we want to obtain a linear function that models average global temperature f of x for an atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration of x parts per million. Round m to 3 decimal places and b to 1 decimal place. Then use the function to project average global temperatures at a concentration of 600 parts per million. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a function here. Let's just copy down our points. I've got 317, 57.04, and then I've got the point 354, 57.64. Okay, so on this, what I want to do is just calculate my slope. Okay, so the numbers are a little bit different, but I'm not going to be doing anything different on my phone, or not on my phone, on this problem. So I'm going to call this x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. So I'm going to find my slope m. Okay, I'm going to do 57.64 minus 57.04 divided by 354 minus 317. So 57.64 minus 57.04. All right, hold on. Minus 57.04 is going to give me 0.6. All right, so I've got 0.6. And then 354 minus 317 is going to give us 37. All right, so that's our slope. So if I take 0.6 and divide it by 37, that's going to give me, and they wanted 3 decimal places, so I'm going to round this to slope is equal to 0.016. Okay, and then, all right, let's find our y-intercept. Okay, let's just use one of the points. I'm going to use 314, 57.04. Okay, I'm going to use y equals mx plus b. My y value is 57.04 is equal to my slope, which is 0.016, times our x value, which is 314. Then we're going to add that to b. All right, so I'm not doing anything different than I did on the page before, just my numbers are a little bit weird. All right, so now let's multiply 0.016 times 314, and that gives me 5.024 plus b, and that's equal to 57.04. Subtract 5.024 minus 5.024, so 57.04 minus 5.024, should be a 4, not a 7, and we get 52.016 is equal to b. Now, it wanted us to round this to 1 decimal place, but because we have a 1 and a 0, okay, our b value is just going to be 52, okay? So now, All right, so I have our slope, we have our y-intercept, so now we have a function, okay, and I'm kind of writing pretty big, so make sure you guys are writing small. I'm going to write let's write this. Let's write y equals 0.016x plus 52. Okay, so this is an equation, and let's replace y with f of x. Okay, so f of 0.016x plus 52. Now they wanted us to plug in 600 parts per million x. So I'm going to do f of 600, and I'm going to plug that in. So I'm going to get 0.016 times 600 plus 52. So let's plug that in. Let's see what we get. So 0.016 times 600 is going to give us 9.6 plus 52. So plus 52. And that's going to give us f of 600 is going to give us 61.6. Okay, so guys, I'm not doing anything different, but all I'm doing is creating that linear equation and then answering those questions. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, and we'll talk to you soon. See you in a bit. Bye.